And we are, I am at least, should be excited about the discussion about EVM, because apparently we're operating in a centralized environment where everything is powered by EVM. So what do we do about it? So this guy's saying Ripple maybe is a solution. I don't know. But let's give a round of applause for our panel. So, and Lucas, I'll let you introduce the rest of the panel. Welcome, welcome on the stage.
Hi, everybody, welcome. So yes, welcome to the panel. Thank you, everyone who made it through 3 days of programming and is coming to the last session for today. I want to ask all of you first to introduce yourselves, but I have a bit of a prompt for you. First of all, obviously, what are you doing and what's the deal with EVM and how did you end up on this panel? And then also, like, maybe let's start off with an easy question. That you can answer as well. What's your favorite thing about the EVM? Maybe, yeah. Let's start over here.
Yeah, hi, great to be here. I'm Samuel, co-founder and CTO at DIA. We are a data collection and Oracle company, and we use EVM in a lot of different forks. So we are deployed on multi-chain on a lot of different implementations of EVM. So we see a lot of EVM implementations in the real world, interact with it, make it work in our stack. And my favorite feature about EVM is probably that it's always kind of the same interface on all chains, so that it's very easy for us to deploy on multiple chains, even if it's chains that are not natively EVM, but they sometimes have an EVM implementation, like a gateway, that we can use.
Hi. My name is Joseph Schweitzer. I do communications work with the Ethereum Foundation. I'm just a fan of the technology. I don't think any of us can proclaim its final use cases, but it's opened a lot of interesting doors. I enjoy watching the experimentation that it's created. So just intend on having fun with whatever it is that we build.
Hi everyone, I'm David Schwartz, one of the co-founders of Polygon Hermes, and I'm taking the role of project lead. We are trying to build scalability of Ethereum on layer 2 by using zero-knowledge technology, CK rollup called CKEVM. And the EVM for us is kind of the core engine, the objective we want to replicate for users in layer 2 to be able to get this scalability transparently. And yeah, we love EVM. It's the objective, and we are very excited about the project we are building.
I am Federico. I am the co-founder of Evmos, which is an EVM, IBC-enabled EVM on Cosmos. And I guess I love the EVM, or at least the Ethereum ecosystem, because it's mostly where the research topics are happening in terms of VM and shared environment, where most of the new applications are getting deployed. And it's very interesting how interoperability is coming into play, trying to connect all these different ecosystems and creating, I guess, an interchain of blockchains in some way.
Cool. Yeah, maybe quickly some background also on me and how did I end up here. I think I wrote my first Solidity in 2017, and I have since spent a lot of time writing Solidity. But I do actually bring kind of also a bit of an outsider's perspective to this, as more recently, so I'm a CEO and co-founder of Centrifuge, and more recently we've been kind of working both in the Polkadot world and on Ethereum, which means as a team, we've been also working with Substrate, which I think has a very different approach to building your blockchain application, your application logic. Maybe my favorite thing about the EVM is, and maybe more of a Solidity thing, but definitely also a big part of that is the EVM. When you're writing your smart contract in Solidity and you then compile it down to EVM bytecode, really the amount of code you write and the kind of problem space is really limited to the application logic. So when you read your token smart contract, you can really see only what's happening. It feels like it's very clean and very little overhead, and I think that makes it very easy actually to understand what's going on. And I always love kind of like that when I see some like technical solution in a smart contract and I can read it and kind of like follow that. So yeah, thank you very much for kind of like bringing this perspective on EVM, which I think obviously is probably undoubtedly like one of the big elements of success that made Ethereum what it is today, right? But there's probably a few people in the audience that actually don't really know what EVM is, because so far we've only talked about this 3-letter abbreviation, Ethereum Virtual Machine. So who here is brave enough to try to explain what the EVM actually is?
I would say it's a finite state machine, so that probably doesn't help you a lot more. But
yeah, let's make it easier.
basically, it's a virtual machine in a sense of that is something you can program. This is running. There's one instance running in the Ethereum chain initially. So there's basically one big supercomputer that everyone can use, and you interact with it only with transactions. So that's the only way to get data in or data out. Or data in, actually. And it's deterministic. So it means if you have a transaction and you do something, and you would do it in a second instance, exactly the same would happen. So for example, there's no inbuilt randomness or something like that. So it's really predictable what happens. And the message system, or the entire programming system, is based on messages. So you can call, if you have other contracts, you can kind of send them a message. So I always see this as it's basically a distributed system where you send messages around, and these messages trigger other actions, and these actions can then have consequences, and again trigger other stuff, or do calculations, or change the storage, change the state of something. And that's, for example, how we have tokens, and how we can have all this token ecosystem, which in the end, if you boil it down, is just a list of address and amount written in Solidity.
Cool, thanks.
I hope that helped a bit.
Let's see. Let's dive a bit deeper into what the EVM actually does. So, right, like the EVM is what most developers kind of like are first kind of like interacting with, or are interacting with, when they're building smart contracts for the Ethereum blockchain, and many others like Evmos, L2s, and there's probably a couple of dozen chains and other variants of the EVM out there today. So, kind of like, as you said, it feels like there's an extremely strong like moat to Ethereum, and the Ethereum like virtual machine, and how it's kind of like developed over the last couple of years. Like maybe to you, David, question on like why this happened and where this is coming from, and then also like how you decided to build your scalability solution with EVM compatibility.
Well, the answer to this question is easy, because we are part of the Ethereum community from the beginning. We believe in this objective of Ethereum, all this, let's say, decentralization movement. We were here for a long time, and we're building always for this community. So the objective of scalability for us was an important topic, because we started building a project of a digital identity on Ethereum. And this project was, well, it still is under development. It's now under Polygon umbrella. It's called Polygon ID. We started one called Ident3. And this project is very interesting, because we wanted to provide privacy and this kind of universal access to identity for every user. And we wanted to use the most secure and decentralized network. So this is why we started on Ethereum. This project is still work in progress, but at some moment in time, with the DeFi boom, and then the prices of the gas were super expensive, and we wanted to lean on all the experience we had on zero knowledge to start building scalability, CK-based scalability. And we started the Hermes network project together with Jordi and Anthony and all the team. Most of them, they are here. This was a very exciting project for us, because the initial state was to scale payments, but we always had in mind that Ethereum was about programs and smart contracts. So all the learnings we got from this initial version, we are now getting all this experience, and Jordi just explained here 2 hours ago. This way to scale Ethereum is super complex, because Ethereum was not designed to run on a CK virtual machine. But we have been working super hard for last year, and we are in a situation very close to launch a testnet, so we are super excited and happy about that. Of course, the way we are implementing that is by building a new processor, let's say algorithmic processor that's, let's say, extensible. There's something we can, let's say, provide more features, more opcodes, but the objective is to provide the Ethereum EVM equivalence. Maybe we can talk about this later, but there's no discussion for us. It's no-brainer. We wanted to scale Ethereum, so EVM is the first thing. Now the Ethereum Foundation and Vitalik specifically is talking about secret rollups a lot, and yeah, we are super excited to make this contribution.
So you talked about EVM equivalency, and maybe to kind of like break down to the audience, right? That's the idea that a layer 2 is actually able to kind of like evaluate contracts, smart contracts, the same way that the Ethereum mainnet and other like fully compatible chains are. Now you, Federico, founded Evmos and said, actually, we want to bring the EVM to Cosmos, right? So in a way, you made a similar decision, saying, well, like to make our blockchain, our project successful, we want to adopt EVM and make kind of like this developer experience available to everybody. What do you have to add to this?
Yeah, I think that like we started as like a library that maybe if you've been in the ecosystem for a while, you probably heard of. It was called Ethereum back in the days. It was created in late 2016 as a proof of concept for how to plug in the EVM into tendering consensus. But it got delayed actually, and the team was passed from one team to another, and then the project itself never saw the light, and I was working on it in the past, and decided to give it a twist in the sense of baking in native interoperability that Cosmos started to provide when they launched IBC, and completely changed the scope of work of the project, and that's why we decided to rebrand to Evmos, to give it a little bit more focus on native interoperability that Cosmos provided. And so the main challenge here is like how to combine these two ecosystems into a single one while maintaining what David said, like EVM equivalence. And that has been one of the main challenges. And because I guess Go Ethereum itself, we work in Golang specifically, wasn't designed to be meant a framework for building EVM compatible chains. So like the challenge here was like, how do we modify some of the components here so that we can still have something that is compatible with the JSON RPC and like whatever the decentralized applications are expecting, but at the same time can still benefit from all the APIs and the interoperability that Cosmos provides. And I think that has been like one of the major challenges in kind of like baking in the Cosmos interoperability into the EVM.
So maybe, Joseph, you want to share a bit of what it was like at the Ethereum Foundation to kind of like build out EVM, which I guess in the beginning was just kind of like a part of Geth, and how that thinking has evolved. I know we had the EWASM experiment for a while. Actually, I've kind of lost track of it. Aragon, yeah. But like, how do you look at it, and like, where do you see like the EVM as a part of the tech stack of the Ethereum ecosystem?
So you can be a loaded word. So is it how I look at it, or how an org looks at it? The org doesn't. Where the technology goes, where the community goes, is entirely up to the ecosystem. These debates that take place, we were joking backstage about at DevCon 4, these lively debates before the conference at a status hackathon where EWASM folks and EVM people were kind of going at it, trying to figure out the best path forward. But consensus lands where consensus lands. And generally is an org, it's sort of like a big community, you know, different tents do different things. There's event groups, there's fellowships, development teams come and go, but EF isn't really a dev hub anymore in the same way that, you know, you might have a something labs, you know, Lucas Labs to a Lucas chain, and the Lucas Labs builds the one client, and, you know, so on and so forth. I think the reason that we have layer 2 implementations and implementations on other layer 1s and groups bridging between them is simply because that's the stack on which the users chose to build. And while at its core, you know, EVM and Ethereum are very married, the technology and the communities will go where the technology and the communities go. You may have the ability to settle to Ethereum in the future, but layer 2s and layer 3s that can build in their own architecture, which is fine. And I think, because you know, you asked about the org side, I think the focus is just, you hear this analogy in the title of, you know, documentaries and books at this point, but in Infinite Something, garden, machine, on and on. The idea of that garden is you're one of the people tending to it. You know, you give a grant where a grant needs to be given. If zero knowledge research needs to be done, and that's not something that has a funding mechanism without a token model, make sure that there's a group that's protocol focused that does it. If there's an up and coming community that could lend a lot to the ecosystem, but they're not in an area where all of the developers usually are, that they have funding to do what they need to do. But coming back to the EVM, this is kind of where the tech stack has gone ecosystem-wide, and it's interesting to see, right? The speaker before we joined the stage was working on an EVM implementation on Polkadot, and we have groups here, even EVM implementations in Cosmos world. I think there will always be other implementations, other engines. EWASM, you know, we mentioned CosmWasm, you mentioned Substrate, but you know, there are architectures here that for everybody building applications, they tend to want their things to work with one another, and I think that's why, no matter where you look, whether it's in Ethereum world, or layer 2 world, or alternate layer 1 world, these EVM implementations are just sort of popping up and popping up.
I'd love to maybe later talk a bit about, well, like what are the alternatives to EVM, or if that really is the one and only path as it feels like today. But maybe before, Samuel, you use the EVM for kind of something that's maybe a bit different than I guess the three of you, Ethereum, Polygon, and Evmos. But so, what is it that EVM plays in DIA, and how did that decision come about to kind of start using it?
It was a very natural decision because, yeah, as was pointed out before, this is basically where the users are and where the ecosystems are. And if you, as a new chain or new ecosystem, you bring up an EVM-compatible layer. Maybe it's internally something different, and you're way more innovative, but you still have this EVM-compatible layer where you can do transactions with like the usual cause. Suddenly, you can deploy the DEXs. You can deploy staking programs. You can deploy basically everything pretty much out of the box, just by the click of a button. Very high-level view, but that allows you to basically start up an ecosystem in very, very short time. You don't need to develop everything from the beginning. You also profit from improvements in these protocols. So you bring basically the big tested stuff into your new project if you make a new project. I think it's a bit like the internet protocol in the TCP IP stack. So there's a lot of stuff under it, which is different. There's a lot of stuff above it from a like architecture perspective, which is different. And there's a lot of variety, but EVM is kind of this one block in the middle, where if you want to be part of this big ecosystem, you better be compatible with it, because then it's very easy for everyone to integrate. And this is kind of the one standard, I think, that's in this smart contract world, where if you want to do something with smart contracts, broadly spoken. When you have this, you can have a very broad user basis in a very short time. Otherwise, you need to build your own ecosystem. I mean, you can do that. You need to have probably grants to developers to build something like a DEX or similar to your own system. You spend a lot of resources on that, and maybe it feels a bit like EVM has become a de facto standard. And I think also what helps this, obviously, is this very open standardization process inside the EVM, so these improvement proposals and stuff like that, which is very open to the community, and I don't think it's called a DAO, but it's basically, it works like one. Even before this term was coined in this presence like it is now, I think this helps to really bring this to the community, because the community can also change it. If you wanted to have a new precompile, you can add an Ethereum approval proposal, and then it might get in the standardization process. Then you can put it in, and then you can be sure it might not have been picked up by others yet. But if they pick it up, they will pick it up in a way that it's compatible with the stuff that you build on your own chain. So it's also extendable from a future-proofing point of view. So I think there's a set of like governance rules, and like also the technical side is pretty clean. I think this combination makes it very viable for kind of having this, this role of this almost unique protocol in the middle somewhere, which I think is very hard to overpass if you want to do another one. That might be pretty hard to get.
So maybe that's a good topic actually that I wanted to ask all of you. It's getting hard to overtake EVM, and so maybe I mean, to me it still feels like crypto is maybe where the internet was in the early 90s, right? Like we're definitely not in the 2020s with a blockchain on every watch, but so it kind of feels like, well, okay, like EVM has this huge position. It's obviously also a big hurdle actually to experiment for people to try to build alternatives, because, well, like if you're not compatible, you miss out on this entire ecosystem. You're at a big disadvantage. Now, do you think that's the case, and it kind of like maybe is almost slowing us down? Because I know we've had quite a lot of discussions about EVM that are very much unsolved topics, like state rent, for example, will require a lot of rework, and I see very little actually in that happening in kind of like the mainstream kind of like application development side, like programming language development, right? Other areas as well where like, maybe David, you have something to add there, but like cryptography, that's just kind of like holding all of Ethereum back, and a lot of EVM chains as well, because just certain curves are not supported. But like, what do you think? And maybe starting here with you, Federico, like, are we getting held back, and where are we being held back by this?
I think the main thing is to start thinking of the EVM as a product, rather than just like a stack that is there and like everyone can use. I think most of the protocols here, and also other chains, for example, Moonbeam, are taking like a more hands-on approach, where they're like switching some of the opcodes, implementing EIPs that haven't made it to mainnet Ethereum, for example, implementing stateful precompiles. So kind of like pushing the EVM a little bit further into Evmos, also in terms of interoperability and functionality with the rest of the Cosmos ecosystem. Pushing it to a new frontier. And I think that's one of the main things that we as a community should be trying to do. I completely agree with the Ethereum governance, especially like in the forums and making it into the specification process is great, but I guess we need to start being more innovative, and how do we implement EIPs, for example, like abstraction to provide a better user experience for the end user. Should be something that we should maybe focusing on, and that's where like all these new chains that are EVM compatible are pushing things forward. Because then, for example, the Ethereum community can say, look, this EVM compatible chain already implemented this and has seen great success, or actually the results weren't as expected, so we might not decide to implement it. But having that as a reference could be great, in my opinion, to start pushing things faster to Ethereum mainnet.
Do you want to add something?
Well, I have a different perspective here. I understand that Ethereum needs to evolve, and it's good. We have needs for evolution. Absolutely agree. The applications need more, and you're right. The CK rollups we are pushing so many changes, but also this is because the Ethereum Foundation roadmap is like this. So the execution layer will be the strategy is to use rollups. So the Ethereum Foundation has its own roadmap. But I will ask also to share the point of view of a layer 2 network. It's in our best interest to simplify as much as possible because as it gets complex, it's more difficult to replicate this on zero knowledge. First topic. And the second one, at some point in time, we will be very happy to decentralize because it's not minimizing governance only. Also, we'll need to create some public good that's just free. We need to freeze in some way. Some point in time, the Ethereum, the EVM should be at some point in time frozen, so we can decentralize completely. But this is just the goal. You know, maybe we are far from that. But there's a process of discovery, which are the needs, and of course the evolution needs to happen. But from the perspective of a CK rollup, we have these complications. You know, these benefits for applications sometimes are a problem for us. And this mindset of becoming a public good and decentralized is also an interesting perspective for us.
Happy Merge Day, everyone.
Yes.
So we've got about 13 hours, and I'll speak for the next 12 and a half. One quick correction. I will say that not only does EF not have a roadmap, Ethereum doesn't have a roadmap. If there was ever a roadmap, you know, in the beginning, Olympus is the testnet, Frontier, Homestead, Metropolis in 3 parts, and Serenity. If you're still waiting for Serenity, I'm waiting with you. There was a pivot and a general roadmap. If you ever saw that really nice consensus video, phase 0, 2019, proof of stake. Phase 1, 2020, sharding. Phase 2.
Are you talking about ETH 2.0?
Yes, this is the ETH 2 roadmap.
Oh, okay.
So you went from the Serenity roadmap to the ETH 2 roadmap, but things got scrambled, right? Everything's happening in parallel. Now 1.5 happens before 1. With rollups, 2 is not really necessary anymore. What even is a rollup model? Is it optimistic or is it ZK? Who wins? I guess we have to let them compete for 5 years and see what happens. The ecosystem outgrew any development hub, and a development hub phased out from being a development hub. So starting there, and I'll put a pin in it, and come back to saying sufficient decentralization matters. I know that I'm a broken record to some people here that I've talked to before, but competition breeds community. And to Lucas's point, to the original question, right? Does adoption of the EVM hold back other technologies? I'm a believer that anything that can be tried in this ecosystem, or industry, or space, whatever we call it, should be tried, and tried really well.
I'm not sure I agree with that.
One of the things that we learned from first the Ethereum Classic fork and then Bitcoin Cash or Gold or Diamond or Craig Wright's vision is that, like people are wondering around the merge, will there be a fork? I mean, there can be a scam fork, but there's always a reason to fork. There's incentive. There's incentive to try everything. There's incentive to try, again, Substrate or Cosmwasm, wherever else we go. Everything should be tried, but you do have a natural gravity, to use a nice little Cosmos-y term, to adoption of the EVM, and one shouldn't hold back the other. I hope one doesn't hold back the other. Just because a lot of folks use the EVM means that we shouldn't experiment with different types of settlement, different types of execution. But in Ethereum land, one of the reasons that there's a rate of execution that's fun, right? There's 1,000 different things being tried at the same time. There's 100 people arguing on YouTube calls every 2 weeks. Proposals being made, and I think Vitalik has the most dead EIPs sitting on the channel. It's not like when you get to an ecosystem and everybody's waiting on seeing what the founder says, and they really only do what the founder says, and you constantly go back to your labs or your foundation or whatever it is, kind of like waiting for somebody to execute or to tell you what's up. There are so many people trying so many different things that good ideas sort of pan out, and it might be the case that even if a technology is a little bit better, that it can live on a layer 2 and settle back to a layer 1. It doesn't need to replace sort of this entire ecosystem. Everybody here that's building doesn't need to sort of learn a new tech stack. We can specialize. I used to call myself an L1 maxi, just because I loved seeing all the different experimentation, but I've recently started to think that maybe that's not the case. There might still be great niches about where some industries will find use for stacks that aren't great for, let's say, shared security models. There might be consortium chains that can interact with one another, but that don't settle to the same place, right? You guys are kind of working in that space, and I think that that's very cool. But you might end up in a situation where a couple are enough. Maybe it looks kind of like, you've got Windows and iOS or Android and Apple, and everything else is kind of like a Linux variant, where it works for a couple of folks, but it's not necessary on sort of a world stage. Experimentation is great, and I hope that experimentation doesn't slow down, but I really think that the way to get there, no matter what the answer is that these groups should really focus more than anything on sufficient decentralization, because no one labs or foundation or whatever it is going to have the manpower to build all of these things out, and instead they end up competing for these communities. They're just trying to pull in the same few prominent applications to run an implementation over here and try this, and a paid partnership over there. It's not enough to actually build a community. Contention breeds community. More internal conflict. The Osmosis versus Cosmos hub kind of spat in Cosmos World last year was great, because what you saw from it was they survived. They survived founder battles and fallouts in the same way that when Geth and Parity kind of butted heads, it proved out Ethereum's multi-client architecture. Now you've got 10. So what's Geth going to do? It might matter now, but a few months ago, what Prism's going to do mattered the most. But now, you're going to have Sigma Prime's Lighthouse flip Prism potentially in terms of users, and you have 9 and I think now 10 clients in Ethereum land. So the way to play these experimentations out and to not have everything end up in EVM land is to sort of keep trying, keep fighting, and make sure that the communities grow, and not just sort of the folks that are closest to the center. Because to bring it back to the first point, and I know I said I would talk for a while and I did, but EF has no roadmap and it doesn't try and dictate one. That's the superpower. It's that everybody in the room here is contributing to the roadmap.
Thanks. What do you have to say to that, Sam?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that the EVM is like killing progress, or I think it's flexible enough so that it can be, because the actual, at least the interfaces, I mean, the internals, I don't know, maybe that is subject to change later on, but I think the interfaces that are kind of standardized right now, they should be, in my experience, they are simple enough that you can already be very flexible of what's running underneath it and what's also running above it. And maybe your protocol has some extension, so you can do more. And I think that's not a bad thing that you can do that. So I think it's flexible enough, which is also why I think it has been so successful. If it wouldn't have been so flexible, it would not have been adopted so far. So I think it's not in a case maybe sometime in the future it might be that there's something fundamental like with IPv4 versus IPv6, but these are still kind of compatible. And yeah, I know the migration is going on since 1995, but that also shows that it's really hard to migrate away and that you can build the entire internet around, even if you know that eventually you're going to need to move because the IP addresses will run out, but you find a lot of workarounds. And if you think of it as a product, the end user doesn't care if it's a workaround underneath or not. It's just, OK, it will work fine enough. And if smart people find ways around certain limitations, which I think is the case here, then it will continue to work.
So we spent like the majority of this time so far without actually ever talking about Solidity. But obviously, kind of like hand in hand with the EVM is also Solidity, right? Like I'd say, while it's not a requirement, of course you can compile other languages into YUL or EVM bytecode. The truth is, right, the vast majority is using Solidity today to develop, and most of the developer ecosystem is actually not just for EVM, but it's actually EVM plus Solidity. What do you think about that? Like, do you think it's going to be EVM? Like we're going to start to think synonymously of EVM and Solidity in the future? Like not start, but actually continue to think of that, or do you think this will change? And do you actually have is there a secret Viper fan in here, or someone working on another language?
I think it also comes into like the adoption of Solidity and the amount of tools that you can find on Solidity. I remember back in 2017 when I was learning how to program smart contracts. Viper was still under development. I tried it out. But after seeing that Solidity had more tooling, like I kind of like start composing knowledge on one single environment, and I think that's for developers the most important thing. Switching from one language to another one takes time and takes effort, and I think that's why right now, because Solidity has been present for the longest time, has been gathering a larger community at the moment, but it doesn't mean that any of these other new languages or compilers are less important.
Yeah, I agree. I think Solidity got to a point where it's not only about ecosystem of developers. For me, it's about also experience, accumulated experience. And if you are trying to build, let's say, projects that get some, I mean, this is the internet of the value, you know. So it's projects needs to be audited, needs to be safe for users. So the more capacity of becoming auditors, because the reviewers we are getting this challenge now with our project. We don't have experience in the market, so you are very worried about how we get the best auditors, the most smart people on board to check my project, because we need that it's safe. So for me, the experience is the critical mass of Solidity. I think it will be difficult to get all this accumulated experience in other language.
So generally, the thought these days is that Ethereum's future is very modular. You know, you've heard enough talks and podcasts about, you know, monolithic and modular and whatnot. So in the spirit of the last answer on experimentation, again, where there's a fit for something different, the beauty of it is you can write in Cairo, you know, use Starkware, and settle to Ethereum if there's something else out there, bringing it back to the EVM. I was at an Optimism talk last night, and Carl Florich put this map up having to do with Bedrock and sort of the modularity of what they're building. You can use the, you know, he had an EVM logo on the screen, and you can come down here, or you could use MoveVM in the future, the MoveVM logo. Go whichever way you want, as long as the settlement layer still settles back to the main network, that works. But also, yeah, there's just a hardening over time. You know, there's this old saying, and everybody here has probably heard it to death, but you know, is it 10x better, VHS and sort of Betamax thing, where over years and years and years and years, Solidity works. So it's funny, when we had these early years of experimentation, it was, this is going to be better than that. But now that Ethereum's kind of crossing the threshold into like legitimacy land, how much better does the next thing have to be for us to kind of rewire? And if you rewire, is it kind of special purpose where it still ends up in this, EVM land, Solidity land back at layer 1? Or should we kind of like move the whole ball, move the whole game? So I would say that more recently, just to me at least, subjectively, it looks like there's a there in terms of, yeah, it's hardened to a certain degree. There's a reason why people use it. And maybe these battles where we're all kind of having these layer 1 fights, different languages, different ideas, different virtual machines. I don't think that there's one winner, but maybe, there's, again, a few that find a niche. Everything should try and find a niche, and you definitely have your niche in both EVM land and Solidity land.
Yeah, I think in terms of language, I think at the moment, yes, Solidity is like the clear one that everyone uses, also because most libraries are mostly in Solidity. But I mean, if you look at a Java virtual machine, you also have other languages that coexist that apparently get used sometimes. And I think it's a strength that maybe hasn't been used yet so far, because Solidity is fine enough for everyone to develop. But I think, for example, if in the future someone comes up with a very easy-to-use language where you have formal verification in it for some subsets of the EVM, and I don't want to open the can of worms in general, just as an example, but where you have features like that, where you can say, okay, I don't need the audit in anymore, maybe because I can prove that my subset of stuff that's maybe not fully Turing complete is safe, then maybe people use it for this use case. So there might be specialty languages in the future, or maybe not. Maybe it's just in 20 years everyone still says, okay, Solidity is the best one, because I think it's from like a usability perspective pretty easy to read. As you said, you can abstract out a lot of the stuff that you don't need in the business logic and have token contracts that are just a few lines of code and have very clear, almost like pseudocode sometimes to read. If you see a contract and if you know a little bit of Solidity, okay, this does that, that's it. So I think this is a huge strength, but I don't think it's like cemented, and also it's not designed to be cemented in that way.
Cool. So I think we have about probably like between 20 and 30 years of Ethereum and like crypto experience here on this stage. So I want to thank you to dive deeper into this, but I also wanted to give the chance. I think we have the ability to ask for the audience to ask questions and maybe get some other ideas that you have about EVM, Solidity, or let's face it, also the merge that you'd like to ask. And I see absolutely nothing, so maybe you need to just shout. Any questions on a late Wednesday night? Not that late. Well, good. Otherwise, I wanted to say thanks for coming. Maybe just very quick closing thoughts. And from my end, well, yes, I said how much I love the EVM and how cool it is to read a contract. And I'm really excited about what's about to happen tonight. So I guess everyone all the best with waking up tomorrow to a nice little surprise. Or probably more likely actually waking up and sitting there and saying, but yeah, anyway, best of luck. Maybe quick comments.
Yeah, as a closing thought, I think like the EVM is still well positioned. Like it's been said multiple times that every time a new EVM gets deployed to a new ecosystem, Polkadot, Cosmos, and other ecosystems that are focusing on different things, it completely ends up dominating this space, and that's because of the developer adoption that the EVM still has. And I don't think that is going to change in the near term. We see, at least from our point of view, the EVM as a product that can be further maintained and developed, and you can add new functionality on top. So looking forward to talk to all the different developers and get some ideas around that too.
Sure, I will add to that our objective was to scale Ethereum from the beginning. EVM is the focus for layer 2. So we are super excited to make this contribution, and we totally think that EVM is kind of the way to go to do a transparent scaling and to pave the way for Ethereum to continue in this position of, let's say, first network, let's say, to keep this support from the community, and yeah, super excited about that.
I'll just say that it's been a crazy ride. Ethereum continues after tomorrow and still has a lot further to go. But for whether you're brand new or you hit the subscribe button on r/Ethereum 8 years ago, the original vision was to get to this point that lands in about 12 hours, and it kind of feels a little bit magical. I used to be in politics, and I keep humming this election night theme song, and so it's fun to be a part of it with everybody and to see to what an insane degree it's grown. So keep building what you're building, and in whatever ecosystem you choose. But yeah, it's good to be here.
Yeah, what's to add to that? So I think the EVM really holds everything together in the current ecosystem. It's nice to see that even in this fast-growing world, our code written in 2017 isn't outdated, so that we can still use it. And I think that's also a testament to how well the community governs it and how well it actually works also in compatibility layers and on the Ethereum mainnet itself. So pretty happy about that.
Yeah. So thanks, everyone. And yes, I think we all agree on how awesome of a tool the EVM is and how much it'll contribute to the merge tonight and the ecosystems built around it. Thank you, everybody.